everyone, I'm Hsing-ay and welcome to the Nutmeg studio in New York City. I am so excited to introduce to you Laura Gates. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Laura is a wonderful somatic movement educator and trainer and a former professional dancer with the Lar Lubavitch Dance Company and also a visual artist in your spare time. And you join us from Norway today.
That's right. I'm a U.S. expat living in Norway currently. Projects, but my sort of main professional time was spent with a company called Lar Lubavitch and Dancers.
Oh my
And
goodness, yes, that is an awesome company.
you know his work. It's beautiful work, isn't it?
Yes. Wow. Yes. I remember as a student when I was at Juilliard, and dance was such an inspiration for me.
It was great working with Lar. He was speaking of music, very musical guy, and I loved um, his interesting relationship with music. He would place his choreography. Sometimes it would be more literal, and sometimes very much not. And he would let movement and the musical um, relationship kind of find its way into each other. He did a number of pieces to Phil Glass and Steve Reich, among and many others, lots of classical composers too. But
Mhm.
I remember him creating, very much on purpose, creating movement like kind of a sketch, like a wash, right? And then sticking it together with the music, and then or he'd choreograph it to other music and then set it against this music, and we'd slowly find a relationship to it. It made for really interesting relationship with the music. You could watch the piece a number of times and see it differently.
Or
Not
you
the
could
sort of
say it wasn't anchored to every measure, it was more anchored in like a section.
maybe. And we found, of course, pretty soon, if you dance to a piece of music, you start connecting with it, and you find, you find your crescendos in connection with the music. But it sort of changed over time, and sort of finally found its way after a number of performances to, what that relationship was going to be. So it was just a
Oh my goodness.
different, yeah.
I think that would completely scare me because timing for me as a pianist is like what anchors me.
Mhm.
And to have to take away the timing in a large chunk is hard. I remember actually taking dance class where people would be like, you do this move to that move to that move without counts, without meter. And that would always just completely throw me off.
Although, if you did that move many times, it would start finding its own inevitable rhythmic sense. You'd find a meter for yourself from the inside. That would start to inform it. So that's sort of what he did. We performed these pieces literally hundreds of times. So our relationship to it, what the emotions imbued the movement, its relationship to the music, all that shifted and grew and deepened, and quite interesting process, over time with many performances.
Within a company, can each person decide on a different emotion to express?
Well, it sort of depends. There are certain pieces that had more of a storyline, and maybe more directly expressive of the music in a way you might expect. And then there are other pieces where it was much more abstract, like an abstract painting. But we would find emotional content in the movement, especially if you performed it after a while. It would just start to deepen, and you know as you know, right? Dancers speak from their guts and soul and start to, the body has a lot to say if you give it a chance. Um, so it, with a lot of performances, um, that began to sort of change in time and become more of how should I say, um, more for me. Here's an experience I had of having a critical voice that I argued with. Like I would do a performance and I'd go, well, it was okay, but I wasn't quite satisfied. And so then I was living for the next performance to sort of redeem myself. I had this big argument going on with my critical voice, in other words,
Mhm.
and which didn't lend itself well to enjoying it, and got in the way, definitely got in the way. So then one day, one day after I did a performance, it didn't feel particularly like my best one. It was okay, but I wasn't satisfied. And this woman walked up to me after, and she grabbed a hold of me, and she says, "Oh my God, when you did this and this, it made me feel this and this." And it's like, obviously, my performance had changed her life somehow. And suddenly the
Great.
light bulb went off. It's like, oh, actually, what I thought I did was only a very small part of what actually happened. I was a vortex through which this expression happened, and then it impacted the audience in ways I could never imagine. And so I thought, got it. My conscious self is one small piece of this universe of whatever it happens. The audience and the performer and the energy du jour. It's um, one whole. What's the German word for it? The uh, physical, spiritual experience, all encompassing, right? So anyway, from then on, I went, okay, I'm going to just offer up my performance like physical prayer. I just said a prayer, did my little martial arts preparation for my performance to ground me into the earth, and off I went. And of course, not surprisingly, from then on, I had magical experiences more often than not performing. I was out of my own way, and I got to access some other dimensions of it consistently. So that was really fun. Like the last, I don't know, 5 to 6 years of performing were wonderful in that way, because I figured out that small thing.
Well,
Just
that's great.
offered up. Yeah, yeah, that was a great thing, and of course, very applicable to the rest of my life. So
Yeah. Well, I think that what really inspires me about dance is it's a way to visualize the intangible. And so you and I both work with sound because even though you're teaching movement, you're doing it by voice, by vocal instruction. And so
true.
the way that you choose words for their feel and the way that you speak and the tempo with which you speak, all of that help your students to visualize the intention and the sensory feedback that you're communicating. So I find that very much like what I do with both my teaching and choosing my words for how to convey something invisible, but also when I'm playing and I'm looking for a particular sound to express an emotion or something. I'm curious, a friend of mine was just introduced me recently to the Laban movement analysis terminology, space, weight, direction, and flow. And I'm curious how much of that was part of your world or is part of your world.
I've had the Bartinia fundamentals, which is sort of a part of the Laban teaching. I've had some experience with that, and they're beautiful, flowing, moving with awareness, just lovely sequences. I use that. I sometimes bring them into my clinical somatic movement teaching just because they're such fun sequences to do, and my students love them. As far as some of the technical stuff that Laban laid forth, kind of breaking apart movement and into its pieces and looking at the possibilities. I only had a little touch of the Laban that you studied, so that's not my expertise. But of course, listening to it and reading about it, it makes total sense. It's a great way to think about movement and think about all the varieties of movement, and all the brain. People have tendencies towards certain kinds of movement with their brains and nervous systems and not towards others. So there's all that too, right? Different personalities of movement. And thank you so much for the really innovative work you're doing with music and music education and thinking about it in some new and wonderful ways. I so appreciate what you do as well. Not to mention your playing is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Laura.